Good evening. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2023 City Council meeting. The meeting is hereby called to order. Members of the public may attend the City Council meeting in person or may watch and listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8 WCTV and at the city's website at www.wayzata.org/WCTV. Second item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody could please stand and follow along. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item is the roll call. Please let the record reflect that all members of the council are present. Under new business this evening, we will consider approval of amendments to the Panaway dock design. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, council members. The first item on the agenda tonight is an amended design that is needed for your consideration for the Panaway docks. If you remember earlier this year, a preferred design was approved after a kind of a long engagement process with a bunch of community members, ultimately approved by the council. That design did require special approval through a variance by the LMCD. That was not approved, it was denied. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and amended the design with some more feedback from the dock working group and put together a design that met the minimum requirements by the LMCD. So we have that tonight to discuss and hopefully you have some questions, and we're asking for approval from that. The design process was led by Civitas, our ultimate designer of Panaway, both the boardwalk or the lake walk and the docks. And Scott Jordan is here tonight remotely to walk us through the design, and he should be able to answer any questions virtually that you may have. So if it's okay, I'd like to turn the camera or the Zoom to him, and he can go through the design.
Sounds great. Thank you.
There you go. Scott, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
There we go. We got you.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Mouton and council members. Thanks for allowing us a few moments to take you through some of the design changes that we had to make to the dock layouts as a result of the variance not being accepted from the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District. A fairly short presentation, but as an update, you already heard from Jeff that we did request a 190-foot variance that was denied on October 25th. What that required was us to modify the dock layout a little bit to fit within the 150-foot limits from shoreline, as well as having to narrow the primary gangway that connects from the Broadway docks to the boardwalk or the lake walk from 10 feet to 8 feet wide. As a result of the meeting on the 25th, we did some additional design studies and then met with the dock working group on Halloween on 10/31 and have a meeting with the working group. And I want to emphasize that group's been great to work with and has really helped enhance what we're doing with the pier, or sorry, with the docks. And a couple of the things that they suggested changing really related to enhancing the usability and access for the commercial operators. So having commercial operators as a member of that group was really important. Trying to maintain and maximize the diversity of slip sizes that are allowed or offered with the community docks. And really a few little tweaks to the design to more closely align with the LMCD feedback. We had quite a few members from the task force or the working group attend the actual meeting with LMCD, and they were great at being able to share some of those thoughts. And so what you're seeing on the screen now is the proposed plan that we prepared for the depot docks that was approved from council back in January of this year. And you'll notice on the screen, the 150-foot line, that's the magenta line, cuts across here, and really a couple of docks on this depot section extended beyond that limit, and therefore we had to change this. And this was mostly in order to create or maximize the amount of loading zone we have where these docks are intended to be, so somebody can pull up, get off, use the restroom at the depot, run by, grab food from some of the local restaurants, and then get back on their boat. They weren't intended to be places where you'd leave your boat for a long period of time. So we're just trying to maximize the effectiveness of that. But with the redesign, you can see in this current layout, there were 17 boats that had permanent slips, as well as 2 loading zone areas totaling 19 boats. The revised design and what we did here, a couple of the big changes that were made was talking with the commercial operators. We rotated this main gangway a little bit to the east to open up this opening a little bit more to provide a little better movement and access for commercial operators to get into the existing wood dock area that they tie up to today. And that rotation created a shift in the layout of the boats, really shifting a few of the larger boats a little further west, and then ending with a 40-foot boat, to hold back this edge that, again, make that commercial operators enable them to get into the main slip, and then realign the loading zone at this east edge. Because of the limits of the 150 feet, we felt having a single straight loading zone here gives us 75 feet of room. This does allow these pier pilings to be engineered to be heavier duty pilings to allow commercial operators during adverse wind conditions to allow them to pull in and drift over and tie up to this loading zone. So we'd flip the loading zone during high winds where it's more difficult for commercial operators to navigate into this. So it gives us a lot of flexibility at the depot. And as you can see here, it actually allows us to, by making this arm parallel, it gave us 1 extra slip on the south side of the docks, totaling us to have 18 boats, as well as 2 loading zones here. That extra slip actually makes up for a slip we have to lose over at Broadway, which I'll share with you in just a second. And then at Broadway, the biggest areas of change that you'll see, again, this is the plan that was approved in January 10th of this year. The main gangway coming out was shown as 10 feet wide. We did receive a variance to do the lake walk at 10 feet wide. We do not want to go back to the LMCD to try to get this to be 10 feet wide, so we will be narrowing this to 8 foot. And the real big reason for why we were beyond the 150 feet was really the bathymetry, or the elevation of the lake shore in this area is really deep when we get to the west end and gets fairly shallow at the east end. You can see this dark green dashed line. That's about 3 feet of water depth that will enable most boats that are 40 foot or shorter to drive in there safely during low water conditions. So we had to push everything out. And in order to do that, we also shifted the larger boats to the east end, so that way we were minimizing the length of the pilings, because this is a lot shallower here than it would be over here if it extended out, so it saved us some piling length. With the revised design, a couple of things that we have done is we've rotated the gangway coming out, reduced it to 8 feet wide, just to pull everything as far east as we can while maintaining clearance from the step back requirements that LMCD has on the east edge. And because of that, in the 150 foot limit, which is this light pink line, we had to shift some of the larger boats to the west, which does make the pilings get a little bit longer. But what we've been able to do is eliminate a few of the smaller slip gangways and just assume that those boats can park parallel to the existing dock on this edge. So we still maintain 31 total slips. We are going down one slip that is that you can leave your boat at. That's in order to maintain 2 loading zone slips right here. And one of the things that we do want to be able to consider and work with the dock manufacturer on, dock installer that's been approved, is whether this gangway, the primary gangway, comes out at an angle. This will go up and down with the wave action, or sort of the water levels. Whether an angled version like this or a perpendicular version is easier and more cost effective to construct. We haven't had a chance to meet with them to share that, but we'd like to enable that to be something we can decide at a future date. And so that's really the major changes that we've done with these design layouts. And I do want to emphasize that the dock working group has been a great group to work with and has really allowed us to hopefully get this dialed in to a point that's acceptable to everybody.
Great, thank you, Scott. Before we move on, any questions of Mr. Jordan? Yes, Kathy.
Hi, Scott. A quick question. This is on the depot dock. So you talked about the loading, so we've got one stationary or primary commercial loading zone area. And then you talked about if conditions aren't good, that they could go on the outside of the dock, which is also designated as a loading dock. Are we going to label that commercial docking only? My concern is, what do we do if there's a private boat there, but the commercial guys need to load there?
Well, the one advantage to it being a permanent loading zone is that the expectation is that the boat operators, it's a 15-minute loading zone, so boat operators would be nearby, would not leave it. What we would likely have to do during adverse weather conditions is work with the dock attendants to kind of manage this facility. And it's really only during really inclement weather where the winds pushing boats to the east, or sort of the west, sorry, make it really difficult to get into this existing dock. They have that problem today. This just provides that flexibility in the future that you could manage it in different ways if you wanted to. So it would have to be a management issue. But again, it's only during adverse weather conditions where getting into the main dock, the main commercial slip is really difficult.
Wonderful, thank you. I would like to go to Director Kelly to talk about our existing docks for the commercial loading areas. And maybe you could speak to what the plan is for these new docks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you could just clarify your question about the commercial use of the new docks, is that your question?
I think so. I would have to defer to Councilmember Iverson and her question. As I understood it, it was about the signage for these loading zones for commercial enterprises that will be using those docks to either pick up their passengers or drop them off. Did I understand your question correctly, Councilmember?
Correct, yeah. And then,
Is the plan that we're going to sign those as commercial
No.
pick up and drop off only?
No, the intent is not for that easternmost loading zone to be signed as commercial loading and unloading. Our main charter boat dock has been and is intended to always be the wooden dock that we have there to the west. As Scott mentioned, there may be times we see multiple charter boats that arrive at our facilities. We wanted to be able to provide that opportunity mostly for the Minnehaha, if and when that comes back to the lake, as it has the most difficulty in maneuvering. We wanted to be able to provide that easternmost side, should they need to be able to get in. After our conversations just this last week, by opening up that area between our permanent dock and the new floating dock facility, it seemed that our charter boat operators felt that additional width will be beneficial and allow them to use the permanent dock more often. We hope that someday in the future, the Minnehaha will be back and operational, but until that time, that easternmost end is sort of a last resort for the charter boat users.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Does that answer your question, Councilmember?
it does, but it also brings some concerns up as far as how you police it, how you manage it. So that's a whole nother discussion. I mean, in theory, I completely understand that. It doesn't happen all the time, but there is occasionally, we do get rough weather and they need another option to be able to dock. I get that 100%. My concern is that we have a lot of people, a lot of boats on the lake, and people will park there. We can't be guaranteed they're going to stay there short term. So I'm trying to just be conscious of these commercial places that may need that and how we're going to manage that, but that's a different topic.
Yes, what I would say is we do operate dock masters currently Thursday evenings, Friday evenings, Saturday, and Sunday. And during those times, should this design move forward, they'll have a new job in managing the loading zones at both facilities to make sure that they are available and are turning over. We understand that the rest of the dock facility are meant to be parked for longer periods of time. So they'll have a little bit of work to do. And if we decide at some point that it needs to be managed for a longer duration than just those that I've described, we can talk about that.
One more, Mayor, and then I'll be done.
Of course.
And we've budgeted for the staff in the summer to manage both this dock and the other dock.
Yes, we currently have the same setup. We're currently planned for that same Thursday evening, Friday evening, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday.
Is that two heads, two people?
We typically plan 2 at each facility, yes.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Iverson. Anybody else? No? Councilmember Pleckish. I think you're right here.
The other
They
side.
moved the mics around on us.
They did move it on me, yes, they did. It's a Halloween trick, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
So I had a question about signage too. I don't own a boat, so maybe I should know this if I did. But, you know, the docks were designed for certain different sizes of boats, and certain sizes fit in certain areas. So are those places going to be signed in a way that says this position can only hold a certain size boat? Or do boat owners just generally know that they can or can't go into these certain spots?
That's a great question, Councilmember Pleckish, Council. I don't believe that we'll sign them at first. We need to see how they operate. Again, we will have some attendants there to assist in directing the appropriate size boats to the appropriate size slips. Our current facility at Broadway, our former permanent facility, offered dock lengths that were much larger than the typical boats that are out on the lake or the most frequent users of the lake. So they were constantly parking in different locations and sometimes making it challenging for those larger boats. Long story short, if we need signage at some point, we will. I don't believe that we will.
Okay, so we don't have a nautical equivalent for compact cars only?
I was thinking the same thing.
Correct.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Yes.
Madam
City
Mayor.
Manager Dahl.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Pleckish, one thing that will be different is we're planning on the slips being pay to park, essentially. So that'll be a software or a QR code, or we'll handle it that way. So that'll help reinforce what size goes into where, because there's going to be instructions with that software.
Okay. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. If we could go to the picture of the Broadway docks, that's where my question is. I'm wondering if the dock working group had any comments about this parallel park slips.
Yes.
That looks a little hairy.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember McDonald, yes, they did. And while we were kind of finagling the design and understanding we had an additional slip on the depot dock as a result of our adjustment, this one had an excess slip or one less slip. We were also concerned about the number of boats that were angle parked on the north side of the dock. And the discussion led to ultimately the westernmost slips on the north side, which were also depicted with those smaller red boats. We felt that it was just a little bit easier for them to maneuver from that parallel position. Based on our overall design, really those slips from a LMCD purpose are not slips. They will be additional storage if necessary. We understand that there are some very busy days on the lake, 4th of July is an example, and that people will find their place there. They won't be designated as slips. We just know that they will be used as slips. And because they're on the backside, they will likely be smaller.
So those 4 boats there, they're not included in the final tally of spots?
How, I believe as Scott has them depicted on here, the 31 total does or doesn't, Scott, include those 4?
It does include those 4, and I will say that the recommendation to make those parallel slots actually came from the dog working group. We originally had them much like they were shown here in the original design, and one of the thinking from the dog working group was that because some of these slips, these longer slips on the south side had to get shifted west, it extended their lengths and therefore the piles are longer. That to mitigate that, having these just be parallel rather than adding extra docks or gangways to get to the boats, this would be a more effective and efficient way of doing it that would really only get used during the busiest timeframes anyway, and that would allow better access in and out of this area And that was one other change that we did make as a result of LMCD's comments. Previously, this was about 35 feet of clearance. We widened that to 40, and the dock working group felt that was an acceptable width to allow safe movement in and out.
Okay. Can you remind me how many slips we have right now down at the Broadway docks, including the floating?
I have one number in my head. It's been in my head for the last 2 or 3 weeks. 153 is the amount of boat slips that we are currently permitted for with the LMCD. And it is our intent with the depot and this design to match that same 153 permit number.
Which was an increase of 4 overall slips between the two docks. Between Broadway and Depot, we increased by 4 total slips with the redesign from what you had today, both permanent and your temporary floating docks that were in this summer.
So there's more docks in this, more slips in this plan at Depot, sorry.
There's one additional slip at Depot in our current reconfiguration overall between what we had existing this past summer and what we are proposing are 4 additional slips.
I don't own a boat either, but I'll just defer to the dock working group if they like this parallel situation better. I'm wary people will pull it off, personally.
Do I dare make a joke?
No.
I wonder if boaters are better at parallel parking than automobile drivers?
I'm going to go with a yes. And I'm assuming just between the slips between the shoreline and the dock, that those, we have to remember, and I think this goes to the signage, depending on the year and the water levels in that year, we have to maintain some flexibility in terms of the size of boat. Or does the size of boat not matter? If the water levels are too low, no size boat will be going back there.
Actually, the way, yeah, I'll take it, Scott. Yeah, actually, the way that our current configuration is compared to what we had previously with our permanent and floating dock system, our dock is quite a few feet further away from the shoreline. I know it's hard to see on the drawing, but underneath you can see the contour lines underneath. What Scott pointed out before, that green dashed line, is really the line that we need to be concerned about. That's 3 feet, and that's typically at the low lake level, which we experienced last year, about 2 feet low. Those smaller boats will find their way around the back almost all the time. Larger boats in a low water condition won't go back there just out of
An abundance of
normalcy,
caution.
yes.
Yeah, okay. And how many feet do we have from where the closest boat is parked to that 3-foot minimum? I think that's the easterlymost boat on the north side.
Yeah, that's about 26 feet, but I want to point out the 3 feet of water is for a boat up to 40-foot length. These slips are intended for boats that are 32 and shorter, so they have less of a draw on the water, so they can navigate in slightly lower water. We just wanted to maintain a very conservative, is the word I was looking for, conservative way of laying this out. So in talking with the dock working group and the original dock designers, there's sufficient room for them to back out and navigate even during low water if it is, in fact, the 32-foot long and smaller boats in this area.
Okay. Excellent. City Manager, anything else on this topic or from Mr. Jordan that we need to cover before we move on?
I don't think so, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So next up on our discussion, who would that be?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't catch that.
Who's up next in terms of presentations or consideration for this evening?
So, Madam Mayor, this is one action, so we will move on to the value engineering topic after
Okay,
there's been discussion and hopefully action taken on this item.
all right. So last call for questions on the design or on this matter? Okay. And then someone care to make a motion to authorize staff to enter into, no,
Madam Mayor,
what do you-
yeah, the proposed motion is on page 2, so it'd be to approve the amended design for the Panaway docks that was presented.
I see. Yes, thank you for that clarification. So looking for a motion to approve the amendments to the Panaway dock design.
So moved, Madam Mayor?
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, please, Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Iverson.
I just want to go on public record saying that I'm quite disappointed that now we've gone through all of this and we are spending a ton of money to gain one more boat slip on this boardwalk, boat dock, where we could have kept the existing one. So not very pleased financially with this decision to cut the other one up in pieces and put it on the shore and build a new one. So,
We do have 4 additional slips, and we will have a dock that is aesthetically intended to be more aligned with the boardwalk, in addition to probably some additional functional usage. Right now, we have floating docks that are temporary. So from an aesthetic design standpoint, that was the impetus behind the removal of the original docks. So it is, your point is taken with regard to the cost, and we're going to be getting to some discussions of that. But I do want to make sure that we characterize the totality of why we did what we did. And so,
I completely understand why we did it again. It's money, my understanding it's being paid by TIF, the new ones. I unfortunately wasn't here in that June meeting, so I didn't vote on that. And again, maybe I'm just a little bit more frugal financially, and perhaps I get the whole picture from an aesthetics, from design, I get it. Maybe it's just a timing issue for me.
sure. No, thank you for those comments. Anybody else? No? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? I'm sorry, was that an A?
No, it was an aye.
It was, okay, thank you. Considering my last blunder from the last meeting, I wanted to make sure I didn't mess up. Okay, so we're moving on now to the next item, and that is for us to consider, under new business, and that is for us to consider authorizing staff to approve change order requests for value engineering options for the Panaway docks. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For this item, we have Bob Jansen, I think Vice President, you got a big title, Construction Executive, Kraus Anderson, and the owner and CEO of Onyx Strategic Partners, Jesse Houlihan, to walk through a brief presentation for you regarding some value engineering discussion that the council needs to have regarding the docks. And just to kind of set the table here, this discussion is all about meeting 2 main objectives of this project. One is to keep it on budget, and then the other is to keep it on time in order to make sure that both the lake walk and the docks are constructed and completed in time by no later than Memorial Day weekend. So when the busy season comes, hopefully much earlier than that, but that's been the ultimate goal. So as any project, this is a very complicated and big project. There's been a lot of ebbs and flows of costs, of revenues, a lot of assumptions being made, and as we get more information, that overall balance changes. So we have some decisions to make tonight regarding the docks in order to keep the project on budget, and our consultants that are very, they know a lot more about this stuff than I do, are going to walk through a brief presentation. So with that, I think Bob and Jesse can come up. There should be a pointer over there as well.
Good evening to you both.
Thank you for having us. I'm recovering my voice, so I hope it's all right.
Now, would you mind just turning the microphone, either standing or, there we go. Whatever
Yes,
works best.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Better?
Can everybody hear Ms. Houlihan? Thank you.
It is not.
Maybe pointed at that, the projector.
It's probably our batteries. They have a knack of
We can do it for you.
dying on
Thank
us
you.
in the moment.
So you know we've talked about materials a few times on this project, and we've talked about value engineering a few times as well. So just as a reminder, we're back kind of with the last round of value engineering. We've been through kind of talking through structure, the lake walk itself, the docks themselves. Now we know the design had to shift slightly with LMCD, and we're kind of talking about the final component, which is finishes on the dock themselves. So I do want you to know that as it relates to hitting those two goals that Jeff mentioned, I love that he started this conversation grounding in that. Success looks like hitting our budget. Success looks like hitting our timeline and having a project that really hits our long-term expectations for performance as well. So as you know, we've worked a long time with this dock working group. We looked at functionality of materials, aesthetic, and the community really did reiterate we like wood. They liked the existing docks, even though they were less functional because they were wood. So that was something we heard again and again. As we chose the structure, both the floating dock system because of cost and the work below the water, but also because we knew it was safer, a little more functional, we started to question, how do we achieve that aesthetic in this project, right? How do we deliver something that's going to function really well, but also look really good? So we ended up with a dock design that has that Kebony featured wood in it, just like the lake walk. As a reminder, that's a thermally and chemically treated ash. When we started this project, we actually talked a lot about Ipe, if you recall, this Brazilian really hard wood. And so we have this amazing designer, not from the Twin Cities, from out of town, who does exceptional work all around the country and knows that product like that performs really well. So it was a chance to look at applying it here where we don't see it often. Kebony was actually us going in the direction of something a little more available, a little more reasonable in cost, and certainly better for the environment. And how it's produced better with carbon just overall, not coming out of a rainforest. But now we're kind of talking about other options on the table as well, because truly Kebony, while a step down from Ipe, is a really high-end product, something we don't put in a lot here, proving to be a little more challenging to find in supply chain, and also more expensive. So I did slightly cover that slide, but we can move on. We are especially looking at aluminum decking, so you'll see more photos and data on that. But first, kind of talking more about that Kebony. Bob, do you want to mention anything else?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on. I'll go through a few of the options that we're looking at from the value engineering standpoint. First option is what you have in your base bid. It's really the Kebony decking. It matches what you have in the lake walk, what's going to be installed there. We do have samples here as well, so you can see what the Kebony looks like when we procure it. It does, over time, fades more to more of a silver look. Jesse can bring that over so you can look at them. Main thing with Kebony, like Jesse said, there is a lead time associated with Kebony. It is a little bit harder, more difficult product to obtain. Durability, there is more durability to the Kebony than what you had on your existing docks with the treated pine. Less durable than aluminum product that is the other option we're looking at here. Warranties, there is a 20-year limited warranty on the Kebony product. Maintenance, the biggest issues, I guess, that we would potentially see with maintenance, I mean, there is going to be less maintenance than what you see with your existing docks. Main thing you would see is really the lead time associated with the product. If there is damage to the dock, it might take more time to get the replacement parts that you would need. Also, the weathered look, how it's going to fade and change. You're going to see the replacement pieces as that gets changed over time. Only other real consideration on that is the lead times associated with the Kebony product. I mean, it may have schedule impacts as well as some cost impacts. The next option we're really looking at is the non-skid aluminum decking. It's a little bit more common for what you see on dock systems of this type. Pricing impacts, so this is really a true VE option. There is a savings associated with picking the aluminum option. Aesthetics, it is going to be a different finish than what you have on your current lake walk system. It is more readily available than what you see with the Kebony. Durability, it is the most durable of the products that we have. It doesn't really change, doesn't weather over time. As far as from a maintenance, it's minimal maintenance. Replacement sections are typically readily available. We can make those repairs as needed over time. If the selection is made, we don't really anticipate any sort of schedule or cost impacts there other than a project savings. The third option we were looking at from a VE has been something that we've had on at bid time, which was just omit the depot docks. Not put those in and push those off to a future project. We've had that cost, know that cost savings is roughly that $450,000 as far as the savings to the project. Issues that you may see with this, and we can probably jump to the next slide. So overall, we have a summary, just running down through that. I mean, the biggest issue, I guess, from the omit of depot docks is obviously you would not have depot docks until a future project is in place.
It's good to note that if you were to say build just that component in the future, it wouldn't likely cost you $450,000.
Correct.
It would not. It would be more money in the future. And often when people give you at bid day their number as a credit to omit something, it's not usually super advantageous number. You know, they're keeping.
Especially in a scenario like this where there's mobilization costs, there is efficiencies by building the docks together. I mean, if we were to build the depot docks as a separate project, there'd be another mobilization cost. Inflation would be a factor on a future project. Potentially, there's a number of reasons that pushing this out as a separate project would potentially just shift costs to a later date and increase. So you can see we've got a quick summary of what we discussed. So overall, I mean, with the Kebony, you do see there is some potentials due to changes in design. Right now, just knowing that to procure, we're going to have different sections than what the plans have currently shown. So we do have potential schedule impacts with that. Pros, it is going to match what you have, the Kebony on the boardwalk. So, I mean, you can see we discussed the cons associated with the Kebony. And yeah, you can see you do have a cost savings if we do go to that non-skid aluminum. The cons really with that non-skid aluminum is the color selection options for that. It's pretty limited with the powder coat options.
And when we reviewed that both in the dock working group and also just in partnership group, the idea with the aluminum would be you're not at all matching, so just contrasting. It's a different material. Let it look like a dock and not really looking like it's fitting as much with the lake walk.
Thank you. Questions?
Is there any way someone could show us all of this? You know, the lake walk and where the docks are, so you can see. My question is, if I'm on the lake walk, are the docks in between? You know, how close are they?
You will see them
You'll see them.
from each other. Yeah.
Well, I know I'll see them because and on the lake. But I wonder if you could just show a picture.
Maybe the area.
Director Keller is working on showing a panoramic of it.
Yeah.
And then, just with the omitting depot docks, we wouldn't be able to use what's always been there.
What has been there has been taken down, right? I'm not sure.
Madam Mayor, no. So the depot docks, we did not remove any docks, and we won't. We did have those, the interim docks, those fiberglass ones that we've been putting out for the last, I think, 8 years. So we could still use, the wooden docks would still remain, and they'll remain with any new docks that are built. We just, we could maybe still use those interim docks if we didn't build it, but it'd have to fit in with the new plan with the lake walk, and we haven't done that engineering yet.
The interim docks are the floating docks.
Exactly, yeah. The fiberglass gray ones, yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Councilmember Fleckish, did you have, no? Councilmember Iverson? No?
No questions, no.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Yes,
Madam Mayor, I think I think Director Kelly pulled up the
perfect. Let's go to that.
larger one here.
And if I could just throw the disclaimer on there, you need to switch. Oh, I need to switch here.
Yeah, it hangs on to that.
Why isn't it? Won't let me.
There we go.
Disclaimer, just with this image, this is the previously discussed dock layout. This image doesn't have the modified layout that you approved just recently. But it does show the configuration of the boardwalk as it relates to our dock facilities.
This isn't the modification that Civitas came up with after the LMCD denial.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. And maybe you touched on this, but I didn't pick it up, so my apologies if you did. The aluminum, no custom powder coating available?
No, not on these. There is no custom powder coating. I mean, there's potential to look at paint options, but right now it's pretty limited to the two colors.
To those two colors. Is that because of the vendor we've selected? Or is that standard across all aluminum decking around the country? I mean, what's driving that? It just seems very limited considering the technologies that have come out over the years for all kinds of building materials.
Madam Mayor, I know that there's a difference between the powder coating and painting. We could paint it, and the vendor had mentioned that. That will be an extra cost, but it likely would not be as durable and need work prior to the warranty. But they didn't indicate that they could do any custom powder coating with this size of a project. I think that's the correct response.
That's correct. With this size of a project, this quantity, they can't customize powder coating.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'd also like to dive in a little bit into the schedule impacts. And that statement to me is concerning because we've been talking about Kebney for an extremely long period of time since our original approval. And explain to me the procurement process and why we're concerned about schedule impacts now and why we didn't, frankly, order the material 3-4 months ago to alleviate the concern for the schedule impact. And what does schedule impact mean? Can we get more specific? Are we talking a week delay, a month delay, 6-month delay? Because it's important to know.
Yeah, great question. I'll let Director Kelly maybe answer as much as he can.
Yeah, I'll start, and I'll lean on Bob a little bit if necessary. Great questions, Madam Mayor. Why wasn't the product purchased earlier? We don't know. That's our contractor's responsibility to
Which
purchase
contract?
material. The dock contractor,
And this is, what's the name of the company?
JF Brennan.
And when were they supposed to order it?
We approved a contract back in June.
Okay.
We don't have a specified date as to when they would order it. We obviously have a completion date in our contract. So it would be up to them to procure materials and provide the appropriate lead times to complete the project per our specifications. So that being said, I don't believe that they've ordered materials to date. So that's step one. Step two, as to scheduling, how might it lead into affecting the schedule, depending on the lead times that Bob has mentioned. And we saw in the spreadsheet, I think if I can go back here, there could be long lead times. Bob has been working with both Brennan and the contractor that is performing the carpentry work for the boardwalk, who's also responsible for providing Kebney for their portion of the work, to determine the appropriate vendor and minimize lead times. Should there be an issue with lead time, the JF Brennan, the dock contractor, is wanting to construct the dock pieces in their shop, which would be the framework and the decking, and bring it out, place it on the ice, pound the piles, and then it would settle into place. If the wood material, Kebney, is held back, they may not be able to follow those means and methods as they had originally intended, and it could lead into issues with DNR restrictions in the spring.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Have we ordered the Kebney for the boardwalk?
Yes,
All right.
that has been ordered. Everything with the boardwalk is procured. That is set to arrive in the next few weeks. So we're all good on the boardwalk.
Perfect.
I mean, and I can elaborate a little bit with what Mike, as far as purchasing of the dock components. I mean, these come out as a system. With the Kebney is purchased with the framing system as well. They come out as sections. With changes like this, the entire frame with changing the layout due to this change with the LMCD, it does change what that system and those sections pertain to this dock are
So
needed.
had we stuck with the plan that we had originally for the dock, before we initiated a dock working group, and we just went forward with that plan, we would have our system, we would have the engineering completed, we would have the designs, we would have a dock.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so right now, not only are we talking about significant changes, significant expense, but we're potentially looking at changing our entire design and our mission for this project, the aesthetic of this project, because we decided to continue to explore and evaluate options. Is about the nicest way I can put it. You're shaking your head no, but we did.
Madam Mayor, the preferred design that was completed early this year was the design that the dock working group provided us with feedback on and recommended to the council. So that was already done when this went out for bid.
I think you're thinking of the LMCD process. That's what threw a wrench in what's been happening.
That's
Number one,
exactly-
if the
But that
LMCD,
came out
if
of
they would've-
recommendations.
if they would have approved of our design, Brennan should have ordered something already, and it would be their issue solely. And within their contract, they do have a deadline to need to get their work done. The LMCD thing is a kind of a wrench that also happened where, they were held up in ordering things, wanting to know that it got approved appropriately, which is fair. And it got denied, which does change the design, which disables them from being able to order it. And now they're telling us there's lead time issues. I think the work isn't done in pressing and figuring out solutions there.
Yeah, I mean, if everything was procured the way the plans are, you would have sections of dock that could not be utilized and wouldn't be applicable to the current design and what's now
So
approved
there'd
by
be
the
added
LMCD.
cost.
Yep.
They would've
But we would
ordered
have had a dock that was originally designed.
Yes.
I mean, initially. Okay. So again, if they were to order tomorrow, if this was an option, if we decided as a council, and I don't know where this is going, if we say, nope, aluminum's not an option, and they put pedal to the metal tomorrow, or pedal to the Kebney tomorrow. Thank you for laughing. What time frame? You guys are the project managers. You guys are overseeing this. When are we going to have our dock in the water? And I need an estimate We need an estimate. This is important. Is it June? Is it November? We must have an estimate.
Yep. It's not November. I mean, right now, we're working through everything with this LMCD thing came up last week, so we are working really closely with Brennan to figure out what is the procurement for these, now that we have final design. So, I mean, we're working towards it. It would be, we get everything in the spring. The issue that you do run into is the DNR problem that you have we can't intrude into the lake bed between April and July 1st. So worst case scenario would be they would have to install the docks starting around that time
In July.
in July.
Okay, which puts our project, basically, the boardwalk would be completed, but the docks would potentially, if we couldn't find a good workaround solution and supply chain solution,
Yep.
by July.
Yep, we could start and all those pieces would get prefabricated and it would be installed in July.
Could we put the temporary docks in place during that time? I'm trying to find a solution here, making lemonade out of lemons, if possible.
Madam Mayor and Council, we'd have to look into that a little bit. Currently, the way that our floating docks are laid out and set up, they attach to our wooden docks. The depot dock might be a little bit easier to reconfigure, similar to what we had before. We'd have to make some accommodations due to the new boardwalk location. The Broadway end would be a little bit more challenging from the standpoint that I wouldn't want, I'll rephrase that. I would want to figure out how to be able to attach the permanent floating docks in a manner that does not impact the boardwalk.
Absolutely.
So I don't have the perfect answer for you. Depot, for sure, we could put something in there. Broadway, it would take a little bit of logistics, but I believe we could provide something.
Okay. All right, Councilmember McDonald.
Just to follow up on that question, would we be prohibited via the DNR? Like, how do we usually get our floating docks in? Because if Memorial Day falls on 5/27 of '24, but we can't disrupt the lake bed for April, May, and June, how do we handle this in the past? I'm a little unsure of what exactly we can't do in those 3 months.
I can explain that a little bit. Currently, our floating docks are supported at each location by about 6 4-inch posts. Very minimal. They screw in. It doesn't take very much time. The piling that's going to be associated with these docks, I believe, are 12-inch. Can you nod your head, Bob? 12-inch diameter posts?
12-inch.
Yep, 12-inch diameter posts. So they'd be driven into the lake in a similar fashion or vibrated into the lake, similar to what you saw with the construction of the boardwalk. So it has a much different impact on the lake bed than our, I'll say, 12 screw-in piles that happen with our permanent or our floating facility today.
So there's less disruption to the lake bed.
There's virtually no disruption to the lake bed with how we've
The
been
floating.
installing our floating docks in the past.
And that's the differentiator with that window of time
Yes, and
that the DNR imposes.
correct. And I will say we are installing a permanent floating system. The docks will be in place throughout the winter. We'll protect them from the ice as we have our permanent facilities in the past. In the past, we've talked about our permanent docks and our floating docks. These will be permanent floating docks.
So can the work, and again, my apologies for my lack of understanding of all the different components. Can the work that disrupts the lake bed, so the pilings and those posts, can those all be put in prior, even though we don't have the cabinet yet, so that as soon as we have it, we can lay it out. Is that the intended plan? I mean, obviously, we don't have a functional dock, but we have those items so that we have no further delays and,
I'm going to explain what I know of the process that is proposed. Bob can jump in. The contractor, as I know it, is intending to create the frames with the Kebney, with the openings that allow for the piling, place them out on the ice, and drive the piling essentially through the dock into the lake bed, and the dock is complete. They are using the dock itself as their template of where to place the piles. Theoretically, they could place the piles ahead of time, but then sliding the dock over the top of those piles to get them into their floating situation may not fit. So they're intending to use their dock framework as a template.
yeah, that does make sense, because I know if I tried it the other way, I'd miss it every time.
Yeah, it's very challenging. One slight obstruction in the lake bottom will throw
Right.
it off by, and inches
Matter.
causes problems here.
Okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to bounce some things off of you.
Absolutely.
Mayor, I have one question, if I may, please, when you're done.
Yes, absolutely. I thought I had another question. I lost my train of thought momentarily. Please, go ahead.
So what I'm hearing you say on the Ebony, that potentially July 1st, if everything goes smoothly.
I think that's actually if it goes poorly. You know, I think we'd still be looking to
Worst
try to
case.
find a different
Yep.
supplier and get this done beforehand. And in the worst case scenario, it would be needing to start construction after that DNR requirement is lifted. And they would be needing to build also from an assembly on the water like we're doing now, which is different.
Yep.
So are you not, is it a supply chain issue for the Ebony, or is it the length of time that it takes for the production and getting them out? Explain to me.
For the Kebney right now,
What the
it is
long lead
it is a
time is.
supply chain concern.
So how long it takes
Yep.
to get the product.
Yep. It would be
And
two-
what
two
are you,
days.
what's the lead time looking at? Is it a 12-week, 20 weeks, month?
We've been told right now, we were told it's about 4 months. So, and that's where we're working for different suppliers, looking at different options right now as well for procuring Kebney.
Okay, because it changes in the industry all the time.
Yep.
So that concerns me. So the other thing that I guess I hadn't been aware of, but I noticed in page 15 of our document, correct me, is this for the ketamine where it says potential warping of the composite lumber?
I think that's actually
Yep.
about composite planks.
Okay,
That's correct.
That was a different option. We entertained a few different materials outside of just. what
okay,
we're
so it's not the Kebney, okay, because I thought that was a non-issue with this particular
Another
product.
product that's
Yeah.
over there, but didn't kind of make it through the design recommendations. So
Perfect.
staff did not recommend.
Okay. Hadn't seen that word before, so I got warping concerned me a little bit, so I'm glad I can scratch that off. Thank you. Again, but the lead times do concern me if we do go that route, because they are kind of subject to bounce whichever way they will bounce.
Yeah, and that's actually why Bob put it in the spreadsheet as well, just in maintenance. I mean, the same thing could come up if you need to repair it, right? Just getting the product, and then finding carpenters that are comfortable working with it, just because it is unusual. Every time something's unusual, it's harder to get subcontractors to be willing to work with it.
No, it is to consider on the maintenance side, for sure. I mean, you can see the difference in color between new Kebney versus weathered Kebney.
Director Kelly, this is going to fall to you and your team if we were to move forward in this direction. Have you spoken with peers at all anywhere in the country where they are maintaining a deck, a dock, anything that is made of this material?
I have not personally spoken with anyone, and I could bring Scott back up on the Zoom if you so chose. He's worked on several projects in New York and in Canada where Kebney has been in place for 8 to 10 or more years. And I don't know that they're in the same situation that we have, being as close to the water, meaning a foot
In
or
the
two
water?
from the water. Oh, yes, almost in the water. However, they are adjacent to the water, and they were chosen for that reason. We had provided you guys some pictures. I know Jeff has shown you some pictures of those locations, and they seem to age very well. I think we like the idea that it matches the boardwalk, and we understand that there are some maintenance concerns. My biggest concern is if something more catastrophic were to happen. If a boat goes crashing into the docks, are we going to have to close the docks for some longer period of time in order to procure materials? That's a worst case scenario. I think the everyday maintenance of the dock, as we understand it, the warranty is 20 years or so, limited, whatever limited means in this particular case. So I'd be okay with it. It's a challenge, as they've mentioned. It's a very hard wood. It's not like screwing in a deck board to replace a deck board on our existing docks. It takes a little bit more work and some specialty tools to be able to do that. But I'm confident in the material.
And we have a similarly hard wood over on the parking ramp, which was selected for that reason.
Exactly.
Its durability, so, okay.
As well as on the Panaway Phase 1 on a
Yes.
lot of our benches.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Madam Mayor, could
Yes.
a follow-up question to Councilmember Iverson's lead time question?
Absolutely.
So Cabanese has a 4-week lead time, and if we say, go forth with Cabanese on the docks, let's get that ordered, say tomorrow. 4 months puts you 1, 2, 3, 4, early March. Can they build these pieces in their shop and get the pilings done in 8 weeks? A little less? It doesn't.
And that's why we're entertaining other options to procure the Kebney versus what we're hearing right now from this particular supplier. Just because if it was truly 4 months, then that's where, that scenario we're talking about, that it would be tough to have this complete by Memorial Day and before the DNR.
How much work do they have in their shop once they receive materials?
That's what we'd have to talk with Brennan more, as far as what that time looks like in their shop.
It sounds like it's not doable, and I'd rather just hear that than it sounds like it might not be, or it may not be. Decisive language in this situation, I think, would be
Yeah.
appreciated.
It's hard, because I think we don't have facts, so it's important to not dissuade you as well. It might be possible, but it has to be explored and thought through. And if you don't know, I would want to make sure we don't mislead you either.
Yep, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's something that's come up fairly recently. We haven't had a chance to vet out the full impact yet, as far as lead time, so we're working on that right now.
How long until you know how long the lead time will be?
We're working on it hopefully in the next week. I mean, we're working on that, so, yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that next week we have a good handle on it, so we're talking to these other suppliers right now.
Are these suppliers ones that this is their main business? This is what they procure?
Yeah, yep.
I think part of the frustration, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but that I have to share is, we knew what we wanted to build. We may not have had the exact design, and we're spending a considerable amount of money. And we've hired professionals to step in, manage the process on our behalf, subs on our behalf. And considering the magnitude of this project, that there would have been, a material hold on a supply of something that is so difficult to have, to say, all right, we're gonna buy this. I don't know if it's going to be 100 square feet or 150 square feet, but we're buying this material. you have our commitment, whatever that is in the industry, so that as soon as we pull that trigger, maybe the supplier's holding on to it, it's over in the corner of a warehouse, something, right? But to not even have these answers at this juncture, I mean, this is months and months and months in the making to now, so it feels very disheartening, and it feels like the ball was dropped, and there were a lot of moving parts. Nobody here is going to think differently, but I think there were some proactive actions that could have been taken. I mean, you guys are managing a project plan, so when Councilmember McDonald says, well, how long is this in the shop? We must have had some kind of time frame built into the project plan of how long they were going to need once the materials are on site to build. So I understand we're trying to reduce that, and that's admirable, but it still doesn't answer Councilmember McDonald's initial question, which is, what was it initially?
Yep, but I mean, and initially it's because this is being purchased as a system. So I mean, that's kind of where this is one component of one system by that overall supplier. And that's where it's a little different than like the Boardwalk where we were able to purchase Kebony. We're purchasing Kebony separately as a component of a system. So this is a little bit different where we're purchasing the frame, the Kebony, all that comes as one package. So it's it's a totally different supplier doing this.
So it's not that they're building a frame and then putting the Kebony in place. This
I
is,
think there's still assembly that happens in the
There's assembly that
shop.
happens in the shop, but it's all through, in this case, Hewitt, who's the supplier for the actual dock system.
gotcha.
Which is why it would be unable to have ordered it before now, but yeah, in understanding assembly, certainly can learn more about that to make sure we understand what that is.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to bring it back to the council and talk about some of the options that have been presented thus far. We have the original Kebony. We have the pros and cons that are listed here. And then we have an alternative that has been, and we'll get to the omission of the depot docks in a separate conversation, I think, just to keep it clean between, for the Boardwalk, Kebony or the non-skid aluminum. And so I'd like to get the council's thoughts in terms of where you're leaning, because I think that'll then drive further conversation. So would anyone like to begin? Thank you,
I'm
Councilmember
happy to
Parker.
begin. I've been in every single doc meeting. I've been involved from the very beginning, and that's why I haven't had many questions tonight. And so I feel very good about the process I went through to think through this. As I think back when we first started this, and I think this was in your first slide, Ms. Houlihan, it talked about the community's kind of preference for wood. And I heard that a lot in some of those original meetings also. In some ways, I feel like we've been placed with the community's trust to do this in a high-quality way. I think there's definitely some timeline benefits from going with the aluminum, for sure, and some more guarantees. But I view these docks as the fourth gateway into Wayzata. So through the Wayzata corridor study, we talked about 3 different corridors or 3 different gateways, and it's going to be a really long time before we're able to kind of create those gateways in a way that I think represents what Wayzata is. But in my view, this is our chance, and even if it's August 1st when they come in, it would be really unfortunate, and there'd be some mitigation that would have to happen with the existing depot docks and the floating docks that we have, and maybe there's some other temporary solutions we can do. But I think it would be very short-sighted. to go with an inferior aesthetic product when everything about Wayzata is beautiful, premium, solid. And this is our chance to create a gateway that is a wow versus just a finished product.
Great.
Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhill. I'm just going to go right down the line. Kathy, or Councilmember Iverson, I should say, pardon me.
That's okay. Well, Councilmember Parkhill made a lot of good points. And I do share some of those points, but one of the things we haven't talked about tonight is the overage, if we stick with the Kebney. And so that really hasn't been discussed at all.
Well, and what I was hoping was to determine kind of preference in terms of materiality, and then not take any action on it, but then talk about cost.
And for me, it's hard, if money wasn't a factor, ebony.
Or
But
Kebney.
I like it. Ebony, fake wood. But it is part of the equation for me.
Okay.
And so I have to factor that in as I make a decision for our community.
Well, let's talk about that briefly, if you don't mind.
I'd love to.
City Manager, what are the options that we are exploring if we were to remain with Kebney for how we would pay? What is the overage if we stay with Kebney?
Madam Mayor, with the information that we know now, it's $200,000 essentially.
Okay. And how are you proposing that we bridge that gap?
Well, there is no additional monies in our CIP that is, allocated for this project. We feel like we need all of the contingency that is left just for any other issues that come up. So as a result, I've had some discussions with the Conservancy and asked, and I know that the Conservancy as a group has preferences on keeping the Kebney. So my conversation to them was, would you be willing to commit to funding this overage, whether it's $200,000, maybe it's less than that, could be more than that too, but would you commit to funding that? And they have told me that they would, and that they feel like it is a priority, and they would be agreeable to that. I don't want to speak for them, but that was their communications from me or to me.
Okay, but you were in direct communication with
Correct.
them?
Yep.
About that? Okay. All right, those are the two options.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for raising that
Sure.
question and being able to at least put some numbers to it. The initial things I wrote down outside of aesthetics is the cost and the potential lead time are two concerns. But to Councilmember Parkhill, if we're going to do it, we should do it right. I wish you had the money in the bank today and you could write us a check. I wouldn't run my household with saying that I'm going to have that money down the road. It's a large sum. It's a large sum for our community to ask, to come up with. I don't know what the time frame is of when we need to pay for that. Do we have to pay for it in the 4 months when they order it? Do we have to write a check to the contractor then to pay for it?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Iverson, it's probably going to be mid next year ultimately when all the last invoices would be paid. So there's some time, but it's going to be, 6 to 8 months.
6 to 8 months for them to raise that money.
No.
6 to 8 months until we're really going to need that money to cover that cost.
Which is the time that they would have to raise that money to pay that cost.
Ideally, yes.
Okay. I never thought I was so conservative. Honestly. But these are decisions I'm having to make for our community, and honestly, I am not comfortable with it. The aluminum, I see it used everywhere. The white could be a nice aesthetic for a lake. It does feel beach-like, it does feel lake-like. I wish we wouldn't have gotten in this position to begin with, but that's a whole nother thing. It's not even worth discussing at this point. I'm not comfortable moving forward with the information that I have in front of me today to support the Kebony. I would recommend the vinyl.
The aluminum?
Aluminum,
Aluminum.
yeah.
Okay.
Ebony,
Ebony.
aluminum, vinyl.
Potato, potato.
Potatoes, thank you, Mayor.
Excellent. So if you were to choose today, which we have to choose today, you are leaning towards the aluminum version?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Councilmember Pleckish.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think we started out this evening by saying the two primary goals are cost and completion date. And very simply, the aluminum option meets both, and Kebony meets neither. Going into this, I thought Kebony is the aesthetic. Most people here, I think, believe it's the nicer thing, but it doesn't mean that the docks have to be made out of that. I mean, it is a separate structure, and I understand your point on aesthetics and Wayzata and that it could be a fourth gateway, but to me, the lake walk itself is that gateway. It is that aesthetic, and we'll have that anyway. The docks are a different thing. One thing that struck me too tonight is that, again, I might be wrong on this, but it seems to me that Kebony is a little less safe, being that people are coming off boats and onto their boats, and they may have water on their shoes and things like that. And the aluminum is definitely far safer than a slick surface. And then there was another comment made that as long as docks are one thing and lake walk is another thing, maybe separating them visually and so on is not a bad thing. So again, getting back to cost and completion, I would have to go with the aluminum option because I actually don't see that as being a downside. And it does cover our shortfall, and then we don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Plus, we get it in and people aren't going to complain that they can't dock their boats.
I never complain.
So that's where I stand on this.
Thank you. Could we put the graphic back up of the boardwalk and docks, if you please? Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of the opposite thing as Councilmember Pleckish. I came in thinking, oh, aluminum was going to be fine. It seems really economical. It's been finished on time. But looking at the layout and thinking about the expectations of the community, I am in favor of Kebony, and I am rehearsing my lines in my head of we don't have docks on. Well, not an expectation of saying we don't need them by Memorial Day, but Manager Dahl, you did mention two objectives, budget and on time, and I like the Kebony.
Great, thank you. I'm going to power up with some chocolate, but I'll wait until I'm done, just in the interest of being polite. One of the cost and budget, yes, bar none. We've been pushing it, banging that drum since the beginning. But I don't think we should forget our primary objective, and that was to have a 5-star experience from beginning to end, whatever that may be. Not just the boardwalk and the docks, but Panaway Plaza, Section Foreman House, everything. These are the crown jewels. This is a showpiece for the state, for the region. And so it's more than just cost and completion date. It is also, what was our objective with the design of this project in hiring Civitas, the best in the business, where we brought in people from every, walk of life, experts in the field of design and landscape, and to select a designer, and really to have a best-in-class project. And there were some shifts along the way that created some delays. I would much rather see, and I'm going to preface all of this with yes, but, and I'll get to the yes, but. I would much rather have a 3-month delay or the DNR window and have something that at the end of the day, we step back and we look back, and every single person in this room who's been a part of this project for the last, not 6, 10, 15, and 20 years, can look back and say, we delivered. And yeah, we hit some bumps in the road, but at the end of the day, 20 years down the road, nobody's going to remember that we had a 3-month delay, frankly. But what they will remember is, wow, look at that great boardwalk. Wish they had done something different with the docks. So for me, I would rather, this is where the yes but comes in, I would rather move forward with the Kebney while we look at our transient docks. In the event we cannot push, and Bob, I'm looking to you, to crack that whip any which way to Sunday to get the materials in-house and that system built
Yep.
as quickly and efficiently as possible, and safely, obviously. Wherever we can shave off time, and you guys are the experts at this, looking at getting our temporary docks in, and looking to the Conservancy to fund whatever that final price tag is for that piece. And looking, quite frankly, at, what does that agreement and arrangement look like? It's not 10 years down the road. It's we've got a bill to pay in 6 to 8 months. So we don't have the luxury of fronting the money beyond that. So perhaps we could get someone from the Conservancy. We're not gonna fashion an agreement today or an MOU, but I need some assurances that this is feasible, that there is money in the bank, that we can make this happen with the partnership of the Conservancy. May we invite you to come forward, Blake, and if you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how the Conservancy sees this coming.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. So I'm Blake Sandvold, Chair of the Wayzata Conservancy, and I really agree with comments that Councilman Parkhill, Councilwoman McDonald, and Mayor made. This really, as I've been involved with this for roughly the last 6 years, the key thing that we've always talked about is this is the crown jewel of Wayzata. This is designed to be beautiful. And, we've talked to thousands of residents, and beyond that, many of them view this as a regional asset, which it is. And the wood, the feel, the majestic feel of this is incredibly important. And we've received constant feedback on that. And that's how we've relayed and articulated that. And I think that's what makes Wayzata Wayzata, is that it is unique. And we had a great board meeting this week, which Councilmember Parkhill was able to be at. And there was really broad-based support from the board that this is incredibly important to us. And, for members who have been involved for over a decade, talking about this project, that this is vital, that is done the right way, and with the Kebney. And, I think it's important to look at this year from a fundraising standpoint. We've been able to have large success this year. And, it's been one of the larger fundraising years that we've had on record. And, up to this point, we've been able to help facilitate about $1.2 million in donations to the Conservancy. And, that's been through a lot of hard work of many from years of relations building on this. And, I think that's important to look at is we want to keep building on that success, and we want to honor those people with the right product at the end of the day. And as many know my background, I'm very serious about finances as well. And this is important to me to make sure that we get this done the right way. And we are open to looking at a commitment and agreements in fashion. And of course, based off verbiage, I need to discuss that with our board on, full approval and backing behind that. But we are in agreement in looking at that. And, as we discussed, one of the things that would help us the most with this, and this is where I would put an ask out there. So I had to do this right in this fashion, is, we've looked at the naming and dedication options, and that's had a lot of success and helped us a lot this year. And, one thing that we discussed and brainstorm is, in fashion with this being the docks, is if we were able to look at an additional naming opportunity for each of the docks, one for the Broadway and one for the Depot docks, and fashion it in a way similar to the Lake Walk and how that was done, where essentially, if you recall, we had the $1 million target, but could have multiple donors behind that. If we were able to fashion something similar for both the docks, that would help us out tremendously, and put us, I think, on a very good track to fully honor that commitment. So, a couple comments. I don't know I can't recall if there was another question, but a long way of talking on that.
Well, let's put it this way, I'll just throw out the question. If you weren't able to raise any additional money in the next 6 months, would you be able to honor a $200,000 commitment when the bill came due?
Within the next 6 months. So I believe on our balance sheets, we're at
I
about.
don't need an exact number, but if you.
We do
you
need
think
to
you
raise
would
some
be
additional
close?
funds. We do need to raise some additional funds.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a bit over a million on our balance sheets right now in unrestricted. There are some restricted dollars currently on there. I would say I think $500,000 of that is on its way over to the city in pretty short order here. So we do have some additional fundraising that we would have to do to bridge that gap.
Okay.
And I can assure you, Peter and I will be working tonight on that.
No. Thank you. In terms of the naming and dedication, that's not something we're going to be, entertaining or considering today. There would obviously need to be a lot more discussion if that's something we're even interested in pursuing.
Sure.
We've had so many conversations about, naming and dedication and making sure we strike the right balance so it doesn't.
Totally understood. I had to bring it up as an idea.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate your tenacity. We will, and I appreciate the candor with which, where you guys are financially and again, the ongoing partnership and commitment to ensuring that, you volunteer at this.
Yeah.
You dedicate so much time to this, as does the rest of the board. And this is to benefit the residents of Wayzata and the city of Wayzata as a whole. So thank you for your ongoing willingness to pound the pavement and find more funds. So thank you for that. Any questions for Mr. Sandvold? No? Okay. So Molly, you said you were in favor of the cabinet. Okay. And we discussed the costs. So it does appear, based on these conversations, council members Iverson and Plekish, do you have any additional thoughts or any additional questions that have arisen before we move on to any type of action and how we move forward?
Well, I'll just elaborate a little bit. I'm not going to fall on my sword or die on my sword over this. If we vote in favor of Kebony for the docks as well, and we absorb an extra $200,000 in cost, and we end up delaying this project until whenever, and maybe we don't have the funds from the Conservancy to cover it, it's kind of like a worst-case scenario. If we get through all that, and we get to, say, September, and I walk out there and I see Kebony docks, I'll be okay with that. I think it's pretty nice. So, like I said, it's just, but for me, we're not there. We don't have the money. We are looking at an extended timeline. And I'll reiterate something I said before. that I love Kebony. I mean, I'm a material person. This, to me, is a lot, this thing right here is a lot prettier than aluminum. I will grant that. But again, to me, the aesthetic, the gateway, the crown jewel of the lakeshore is the lake walk, not necessarily the docks. So I would be okay with going with aluminum at this point. If I'm in the minority tonight, I'm okay with that too, because I think ultimately we're gonna have a nice thing either way.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, every time I see, and I appreciate Councilmember McDonald bringing this up, when we look at the aerial of that design, those docks really bookend this massive project, and will be seen not only from the lake, but also from the boardwalk. And that is my concern. And so from a flow perspective, it seems that, again, for me, may differ in opinion here, that the Kebony has a nicer kind of flow. It'll be less disjointed as it moves forward.
Can I make one last comment since?
Absolutely.
So I agree with what Alex has said as well. I have faith and I hope that you're able to raise the money. But I continue to be concerned about project creep and what else could be around the corner. And I think it's going to get, obviously it's moving forward with the Kebony, but again, I'm just concerned about the other unknowns that we have yet to encounter. So I just want to put that on record.
Yeah, thank you. And, I do want to commend staff for not, we could just go into the contingency. We have enough in contingency. However, it's still too early for that.
Right.
And so, I appreciate the risk mitigation with that at this juncture. And, I know this is a philosophical thing, but I'm going to make the point anyway. Changing the materiality of a project and then saying and going with a less expensive alternative, I might be splitting hairs here, but that's not really coming in at cost. That's saying, I was going to buy a Rolls Royce, and I'm buying a
Corolla, which I say that because I have one.
right? I mean,
Careful, you're gonna irritate somebody.
I spent the same amount of money, but I didn't get the same product at the end of the day. So, I get it. It's philosophical and everything else, and yes, dollars. But at the end of the day, if I didn't, if I went to spend $200 on a cashmere sweater and I walked out with a $200 cotton sweater, might be a very nice cotton sweater, but it's still not a cashmere sweater. Maybe that's a better analogy.
Less offensive, probably.
So do you see? So, we could still say we're on cost, but we don't have the same cashmere. How's that?
It's good.
You like that one?
Well done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I came up with that one on the fly. All right. So,
And Madam Mayor, I'll just say that then the action tonight, based on what I've heard from the council, is really not to approve a value engineering option. I think it is helpful for the record to approve Kebony as the decking material. If you wanted to direct staff to pursue an MOU, we're going to do that anyway. You could, if you felt strongly that that direction needed to be in the motion, I think you could.
I'd like to take two
Okay.
actions.
Sounds good.
I'd like to have one action, unless the city attorney would prefer that I do it in one. But I was thinking one action to pursue the Kebony. I think staff is under the understanding of what we're looking to achieve if we move in that direction, if we have the votes for that. And then a separate action to direct staff to work with the Conservancy on an MOU for the cost of the Kebony.
Madam Mayor, that sounds good to me. I think the MOU, because we're a partnership, there's already a legal framework for how it works. But I think in this case, like the maintenance and operations MOU, it's really good to have a detailed understanding to make sure everything's clear on when things should be submitted and who's doing what. So I like that idea.
I would agree.
One quick thing, it is our expectation that the docks are done by Memorial Day. That's what we're going off of. So they did talk, I'm glad they talked about worst case scenario, but that's not what we're working towards. We're working towards summer season Wayzata, we're gonna have full docks.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I think that that's really important for everybody to understand. We know you guys are working, maybe not around the clock, but you're very diligent and you understand our expectations. And it's good to call out the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
We just don't like the worst case scenario, so we're looking to Memorial Day. Okay,
Can I ask one clarification question?
absolutely.
Isn't the cabinet already approved?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I was going to make that same point as Councilmember Parkhill. I think it's technical, but I think it's worth noting for the record that you're just affirming.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes with your analogy about Kashmir, too. Kebony's been in the plan, and if council votes tonight, it'll still be in the plan.
So do we need to vote for anything if it's already approved?
I think that would be helpful after all this discussion to memorialize it. I think instead of using the word approve, you just say you affirm the use of Kebony as planned. Yeah.
All right, then would someone care to make a motion to affirm the use of Kebony for the Panaway Dock construction as planned?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Wonderful, thank you. That motion has been first and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I will vote against this, but I want it in the record that the only reason I'm voting against it tonight is because we don't have the money. We're over it. If we had that solution solved, I mean, we had the solution for that, I would be in favor of it. But I'm going to vote against it simply because I want to be conservative financially.
I appreciate that, thank you. Quick point of discussion with City Manager Dahl. In the event we have partial payment from the Conservancy as they continue to raise funds and make us whole, we have another CIP available to us or another fund available to us where we could essentially bridge that financial gap temporarily.
Madam Mayor, I do think we have alternatives. I would prefer not to go that direction, but I think we could.
I don't either.
As we get closer towards that date, we could have some alternatives for the council to explore.
Without impacting, and they would have to be funds that would not be impacting any projects that are already planned that would adversely impact the city or the community or its citizens.
Or the levy as will be.
Absolutely not the levy.
Correct. I think we would have some alternatives that wouldn't affect those.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion on the table that's been first and seconded. Thank you for the discussion. I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. The next item then is with regard to making a motion to direct staff to work with the Wayzata Conservancy to draft a memorandum of understanding for the purpose of paying for the Kebony and the Panaway Dock.
Well said, and we would have that on an up-and-coming council meeting as kind of a receipt. But if we got any of the details wrong, you want to comment, we could go back and change it. But that's how we'd process it, like we did process the maintenance and operations MOU as well.
Wonderful. Would someone like to make the motion I just made, because I won't be able to restate it?
Well, I'll make it easy. I'll just say so moved.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been first and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Did I say it? Yeah, I did say aye. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. There was one other item, and that was with regard to the depot docks. Quick question on that. do we want to run down? We'll start with Councilmember McDonald. Are you in favor of removal of the depot docks?
Removal of the depot docks from the plan?
Yes.
I'd like them to stay in the plan.
Perfect. How about Councilmember Plekish?
I'm not sure I'm prepared to give an answer for that. I think I need more information. When you say take them out,
It says, well, as our consultants mentioned, one option is to remove the depot docks from the project for a savings of $450,000. But that was a low number. If we were going to construct it at a later time, it would be higher. We don't know how much higher, but we have to account that that's not the full value of the docks because we have to remobilize. There's going to be inflation.
are we going to lose dock space?
We're going to, yeah, I mean, all of the ones that were discussed by Civitas, minus the temporary docks
Yeah.
potentially.
We'd lose a good part of it, and they won't be as functional.
Or maybe I'm confused here. Is this because we might have a delay in the other project?
No, it was just a mechanism to cut $450,000 out of the budget.
Right.
But I'm going to go out on a limb and that if we go back in a year or 2 years, it's easily going to be double that.
Or triple.
Probably
Or
triple or quadruple.
To go back in 2 to 3 years, it's going to be at least double if we were to build.
So I'm confused, Mayor. When we got these bids back for these docks, it came in at $1 million something. Why are we at 450 now?
So
Both docks were $1 million something at the time. Where's the difference in the number?
Councilmember Iverson, we expected the docks to come out at about 2 million. For the entire project, it came out at 2.5. That was the lowest bid. We thought we'd get a deduction as an alternative for 800 and something thousand for not doing the depot docks, just in case. You know, we had a kind of a plan B in case the bids were too high. Working with the contractor, they have indicated that they could move forward with a change order to around $450,000.
So is that what was approved in June when I was gone, that would come out of this TIF district to pay for these docks? How are these docks being paid for?
Yes, I believe they're being paid for by the TIF district.
Okay,
yes.
because they originally
They are.
weren't in the original bid, if I remember. We took them both out.
They were just separated as a separate project.
Okay, so if I'm looking at the spreadsheet on page 13, so it's the 259 that you just talked about.
Yep,
And that 259 is being paid by the TIF district.
correct.
Do we have any money left in that TIF district?
We're covered. We're just wondering right now, do we want to pull the depot docks to save $450,000? And then possibly have to spend double or triple that in a few years' time to add them back in?
Plus, we don't have the docks for that time.
Well, we could use the old ones, but,
The floating plastic ones?
well, I'm in complete agree, I mean, the economy of scales of building it now are absolutely 100% make complete sense. Had I been here in June, I would not have voted to have these paid for by this TIF district. So I guess I'm going to stay with where I initially would be, and I'm not comfortable continuing to pay for things that, TIF money that's many, many, many years out.
So would you vote to remove them?
I haven't made a decision at this moment. I
Okay.
need more information.
What kind of information do you need to make a decision? Because we have to make a decision tonight.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
You know, I think this was an option that staff and our consultant team had put together as purely a cost savings measure, which of course was one of the value engineering goals of this exercise. So if council takes no action, the docks remain, and we're proceeding. It's just kind of like with the wood as well. So you wouldn't necessarily need to take action on this tonight if you want to send a very clear message that you reaffirm keeping the docks. I suppose you could, but really it's only if council feels like we need to save some money. We think it's a good idea to remove that from the project and save that amount of money. You have that option. But I think you've outlined the case for why that wouldn't be a good idea, and I didn't hear much support across council for that either.
Yeah, and thank you for the clarification. I do want to, just for the record, have the entire council express their point of view as to, pull it for the 450 savings or leave it and proceed as planned. So.
I can jump in. I think we should move ahead with the docks, that we're not getting a very good credit at all. They obviously have the business and they don't want to give it up. So it will cost us $800 and some thousand. That was, I guess, the number thrown around tonight to actually build the depot docks. And, the cost could be 25, 30, 40% higher in a year. So I am full speed ahead. Do not take the credit.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pleckish?
I'd follow the same suit, yeah, keep them.
Okay. Councilmember Iverson?
It's an ethical issue for me. The docks are going to be done at a different date, and they're now in the project. I don't know how I couldn't support it. I mean, why? I just heard so many of my fellow council members get behind what a great thing this is for our community, and the lakefront and the docking and all that stuff. And if we take those away, we've taken away a part of the whole dock system and the boardwalk and all that. I recall previous meetings and they were going to be done at a separate date, and now all of a sudden it's this project creep. It just keeps growing, and so it's an ethical issue for me. But I'm not going to take the $450 credit. It doesn't make any sense from a business standpoint for me. But this is an ethical issue for me, and so I'm going to just leave it at that tonight.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it sounds like I'm in favor of keeping it as well. I'm going to chalk up the low credit amount to the mobilization costs. I'll just leave it at that. This is the same. Yeah, I'm not going to beat that dead horse about the ordering and the supply chain issues. But it'll be really good to debrief at the end of this project in terms of the experiences that, our folks have had and the challenges, and especially as, we move forward with other projects, what's gone well and what hasn't. But it's a shame. Okay, I'm in favor of keeping it as well. So it looks like we'll just move as planned.
Yep, exactly.
Fantastic. All right. Anything else that you need from us this evening?
I didn't know if you wanted a city manager's report or not tonight.
No. Thank you. Not for a special meeting, for our standing meetings. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
Now, I will mention, and maybe I think it is important, we have applications that we are receiving for boards and commissions. We didn't mention that at our last council meeting. That was an oversight on my part. When are those due?
Gosh, Mayor, I don't have that in front of me,
Oh,
but
sorry.
I believe it's at the end of November, so there'll be another opportunity at our next meeting, which will be on November 14th, to promote it one last time. And then ultimately, those interviews will be held in December.
Okay.
So we're now just starting to kind of blast even more so we get some more hopefully applicants.
Excellent, good. All right, well, then, seeing that there's no city manager's report, how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, and a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.